Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, an unlikely trade candidate, Kenley Jansen, and the World Series is now set. That's what we're going to get into. That's what's on tap. So make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is sponsored by SimpliSafe Home Security with Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe. 24/7 monitoring agent captures evidence to accurately verify a threat for faster police response. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Visit simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb to learn more. This is the daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers, and make it easy on yourself and never miss a day by subscribing, because you know we're never going to miss a day. So if you subscribe, that means you won't miss a day. If this is your first time listening or watching, I'm Vince Samperio, and that's my co-host, Jeff Snider. We're both lifelong Dodger fans that have been able to cover the team in a variety of ways, continue to cover the team, and have spent some time in the locker room and clubhouse, but doesn't make us insiders. We're just here bringing you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning, and that's what we're here to do today. The Dodgers, as you all may know, are not playing in the playoffs. We'll talk about the World Series matchup, which is now set later on in the show. But, Jeff, we're going to talk about a few things. One unlikely trade guy in Will Smith, and then Kenley Jansen, who had TMZ exclusive that was oversold a little bit, but we'll get into that after. But yeah, Jeff, it was a weekend. Now we're here on Monday morning for these listeners and ready to talk Dodgers.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny how even when there's not anything new to talk about, there's plenty of new things to talk about because people keep throwing out rumors there, and we've got two rumors, I guess, to talk about. One about Will Smith and one about Kenley Jansen that both might end up to be nothing, and probably more likely than not will turn out to be nothing, but definitely food for thought anyway.
Yeah. The first one comes from an article from Alden Gonzalez. We're going to talk about Will Smith as a potential trade candidate, and it's more of him kind of doing he has 3 questions for the Los Angeles Dodgers after being eliminated from the postseason, and he goes through notable free agents and then trade candidates. He lists Will Smith, Gavin Lux, Dark Gratterall. We'll talk about all those guys at some point this week, but we're starting with Will Smith, and the background he gives is that the Dodgers continually produce elite catchers. The latest being Diego Cartaya. We own Diego Cartaya coming up in the background. And he thinks that if the Dodgers can get a haul for Will Smith, particularly to bolster their rotation, that maybe they'll be tempted. And Will Smith is eerily similar to another catcher that was traded that did net an arm. It was a young arm and hasn't been too much of a proven arm yet. But either way, that's how trades go. But before we talk about that straight comparison, just Will Smith trade candidate idea, dislike, thoughts. Let's get it started.
Yeah, nobody's untouchable, I guess, and it's that phrase that Alden Gonzalez says: if the Dodgers can get a haul, that's doing a lot of work there because he doesn't really define haul. But I feel like it would have to be a really, really big haul. And like you said, you compare him to JT Realmuto, who was traded 4 years ago, and the similarities are pretty stark. They were exactly the same age, like literally 10 days apart in Smith's current age and Realmuto's age at that point. And Realmuto had 1 extra year of service time under his belt, so he was already a year into arbitration, which means he was a year closer to free agency, which means Will Smith would have more value as far as he's got 3 years of team control left, whereas Realmuto only had 2. But also, I feel like the JT Realmuto trade might end up being a cautionary tale because, like you said, the Marlins in return for Realmuto from the Phillies, they got Jorge Alfaro, who was theoretically Realmuto's replacement, but turned out that he instead is now like a cheerleader on the Padres bench. He's just not very good. And then they got a guy named Will something who hasn't even made the big leagues. He's been pretty bad in the minors. He was a decent pitching prospect at the time, but the headliner was Sixto Sanchez. And Sixto Sanchez has made the big leagues, but he's had injuries and stuff. And really, what you're looking at from the Marlins standpoint is we traded JT Realmuto, and basically all we got was Sixto Sanchez, who, I mean, yeah, Sixto Sanchez may turn out to be a Cy Young winner at some point. He's definitely very talented, but I don't think Sixto Sanchez constitutes a haul. And I think the Marlins, well, maybe not the Marlins, a better organization than the Marlins would probably look back at that Real Muto trade and say, yeah, we didn't get nearly enough for him.
Yeah, and the biggest difference is, well, just with the teams, the Marlins trading him, that was just a way of that they kind of handled things back then, and they weren't gonna be able to afford him. He was gonna start costing more and everything else. With the Dodgers and Will Smith, it's like you can't make that trade for an unproven prospect for Will Smith, unproven pitching prospect. They have two of those. They have Gavin Stone and they have Bobby Miller. Those are two Sixto Sanchez types of a high prospect that you don't know what you're gonna get yet. And to constitute the haul, or to constitute, to trade Will Smith, you need to get a proven one or two pitch, number one, number two pitcher. And then, maybe that's it. Maybe there's more, who knows? Maybe you have to give up more, but it just wouldn't make sense. I don't think there's really any team out there that's going to trade a proven number one or number two caliber pitcher for Will Smith, regardless of how bad their catching needs are, regardless of anything else. Maybe the Marlins, because they do have a lot of pitching and they do, can't hit. And maybe, Pablo Lopez is that name that can be brought up in a potential deal. But even then, just realistically based on value, high hitting catchers are rare, but they're not necessarily high value.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like the value that Will Smith has to the Dodgers, and even with Cartaya coming up soon, that Alden Gonzalez mentions, Cartaya isn't going to be ready next year. He's probably not going to be ready even in 2024, at least not at the beginning of the season. So you're looking at either Austin Barnes as your starting catcher next year, or having to go out and find a replacement for Smith. And I don't know. I haven't looked recently at the catching market on the free agent market, but I can't think of any huge names hitting that free agent market. And so you got to replace him with somebody. Cartaya is not ready. Dalton Rushing hit the snot out of the ball in the minor leagues, but that was low A. I mean, he batted 424 with a 1317 OPS after being drafted. But that was 128 plate appearances in low A at Rancho Cucamonga. And Dalton Rushing doesn't appear to be much of a catcher. I watched him play in person when he was playing for the Quakes, and I think he's going to hit. I think he's going to be a big leaguer. I don't know that he's going to be a big league catcher. And so, I mean, they would have to figure out something to do. So, at some point in this offseason, Vince, I want to dig into what a trade for Shohei Otani would look like. But when I was playing around with that on that trade projector thing, I forget what trade values something website, it actually had a Will Smith for Shohei Otani 1-for-1 trade, actually looking pretty even on both sides. Obviously, the Angels wouldn't do that. Would you do that from a Dodgers standpoint?
I mean, you're trading 1 year of Otani for the 3 years of Smith. That's probably where that lies. But yeah, I mean, I would do that because you get Otani for the year, and you get to show Otani what a real MLB franchise that's run competently looks like, and you'll have the money to sign him after. So yeah, I mean, realistically, yeah, I'm down to do that. If it means, I think, it's like Wilson Contreras and then a bunch of like also rans, Zunino, Narvaez, Gary Sanchez. But you can get by with a lot worse at catcher, and you upgrade very significantly your rotation and your DH.
Yeah, I forgot Contreras was going to be a free agent. I don't like Wilson Contreras, but he could definitely be a stopgap for a 2-year contract. I don't know if he's going to, he had a solid season. I don't know if he's going to get more than that, but yeah. But I just feel like ultimately what the Dodgers would need to get would be an actual major league pitcher and a few prospects, like good prospects, in order to trade Will Smith. And it's hard to picture that haul coming from anybody.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we're agreeing there. We'll see the next segment. There's not much to agree or disagree on, but we're gonna have a discussion about Kenley Jansen, because TMZ spoke to Kenley Jansen, and they had a lot more to say in their headline than was actually said. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about Kenley Jansen and thoughts about him coming back next year. First, let's talk about SimpliSafe. As everyone knows, athletes rise and fall in the ranks, but when it comes to saving money, SimpliSafe always stays on top. Right now, you can save big with SimpliSafe Home Security. They're giving listeners 40% off their advanced security system. SimpliSafe was just named the best home security of 2022 by US News. I use it. I love it. You'll love it too, because at SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. With 24/7 professional monitoring, when a threat is detected, SimpliSafe's monitoring professionals promptly contact you and dispatch first responders to your home, even if you're unaware or able to respond. And guess what? It's easy. You can check it out on an app. You can check out all those cameras you guys set up. You can check everything else out. You can detect motion. You can get, alerted when there's a threat, or if the sensor goes off, whatever the case is, SimpliSafe is there for you. So don't miss this chance right now to save big when you protect your home with the best. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb today. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, Jeff. So the next one comes from, like I mentioned, a TMZ article that was accompanied by a video of them catching Kenley Jansen at the airport. And the headline reads, Kenley Jansen, I had blast with Braves, but I'm open to Dodgers return. And when you actually talk about it and they asked him about coming back to LA, he said, hey, we'll see. We'll see what's out there. He had nothing but nice things to say about Atlanta. But in the end, he was very non-committal. It didn't seem like anything more than, yeah, obviously he's open to whoever pays him money to come pitch for them. And if it happens to be the Dodgers, then it happens to be the Dodgers. Obviously, I would imagine he'd want to be in LA. He's already has the home in LA. That's why he was back in LA. But yeah, I mean, you can get into if the TMZ sensationalization. I don't know if that's a word, but it is now. And then talk about Kenley Jansen and what that would mean for a Dodger reunion.
Yeah, I mean, they might as well just put the headline newsflash. Free agent is not limiting his options in mid-October. Like, yeah, of course, Kenley's going to be open to going wherever they want to pay him money. And yeah, the Dodgers, in the right situation, it could be a fit for him. If you watch the video, you could tell that Kenley was, I mean, his entire answer to every question was basically, dude, I'm not going to tell you anything important. Why are we doing this? Like, I wish my Uber would hurry up and pick me up so I could walk away from this dude. That was the tone of the conversation. And literally, Kenley never said the word Dodgers or Los Angeles even. They asked him, what are you doing back in LA? And he said, I live here. And other than that, he never mentioned the Dodgers. The questioner said, would you consider coming back to the Dodgers? And that's when he said, like you said, hey, we'll see. We'll see what's out there. And it's such a non-story that but the idea of Kenley coming back, obviously the Dodgers are going to have either a spot open at they're not going to have a closer anyway, right? As of right now, obviously they're not bringing Craig Kimbrell back. And if they wanted to go with a full-time closer, they could do worse than Kenley. He did lead the league in saves this year. He did have his second worst season of his career after better only than 2019. But yeah, I mean, Kenley being back with the Dodgers would be fun in a lot of ways. The fans, for the most part, love him. I don't think that the Dodgers would be interested in signing Kenley to be their closer. I feel like if the Dodgers are going to go with a closer, it's going to be somebody that isn't going to give them heart issues like Kenley Jansen would, like Craig Kimbrell did. So I hesitated to use the phrase heart issues because we're talking about Kenley. I didn't mean that as a snub at him. Obviously, Kenley's health is very important to me. But it makes us sweat a little bit when Kenley's in the game. And so it's hard to see the Dodgers voluntarily signing up to say, hey, let's do the Kenley experience again now that we just got done with the Kimbrell experience after a couple of years of the Kenley experience.
That's exactly my thought is, as much as maybe some people want to have a for sure closer and have that mentality, I think it's one of those things where the ship has sailed and, same with Jack Peterson, same with Kike, same with those types of guys. Not that there was anything wrong with, bringing them back if they had, but it's one of those where the ship has sailed. And if you want to have a closer, you take somebody that's on this roster, almost anybody on this roster, that's a reliever, regardless of how they performed in this last series, could be a candidate. And to bring back Jansen is just, like I said, opening the door, not just for, us to think about, oh man, like, Jansen's coming in, but opens the door for fans and, Jansen's mental health. It opens up the doors for a lot of stuff that's not really necessary, considering he's not a dominant closer. And, same thing with free agency, kind of like catcher. It's Edwin Diaz, and then it's, Kenley Jansen, Craig Kimbrell, and then a bunch of other guys that are mostly relievers, not really closers. So, the good thing is that the Dodgers have relievers. Basically, their whole bullpen's coming back, plus Daniel Hudson will be coming back from ACL injuries. And, Kenley will have a full, or I don't know, Kenley's a free agent, but if he does come back, he'll have a full off season and be healthy, and, different guys like that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, if they signed Kenley Jansen, it wouldn't be like, woe is the world or anything, terrible. But I just think it's one of those things. The ship has sailed. Let Kenley, do what he needs to do and move on. And the Dodgers do the same. And I would like them to not go in with the set closer. So Dave Roberts would have to manage differently the entire year, and it maybe would change his perspective on, making decisions in October. Realistically, we talked about it, like, the decisions he made in this series weren't really what cost him. It was guys not coming through on offense, and then, just untimely, decisions, other than a couple things, but it realistically didn't cost them. It just didn't help them. But it would be interesting to, have Dave Roberts on his toes pretty much every game and have to decide how to deploy these arms.
Yeah, it is interesting to think if they would go with the closer by committee for a whole season. I think there was value in having Kimbrell in that role this year. The fact is he only blew 5 saves or whatever it was, because when you have as good an offense as the Dodgers have, there's not going to be that many close save situations anyway. And but I can't tell if that's an argument in favor of or against the closer by committee, because the fact is you could just say, you know what, we're just playing matchups, and we're gonna really the Roberts is a very good regular season manager. To the extent that he has struggled, it's been when he changes in the postseason, when he does say, instead of my relievers, I'm going to use Clayton Kershaw against the heart of the Nationals order, or instead of my reliever, whatever it is, I'm going to, instead of letting Tyler Anderson throw 100 pitches, I'm going to pull him after 80 something pitches. Those are the things that where when he changes in the postseason, that's where he seems to get himself in trouble. And I don't know that there's anything that they could do in the regular season that's going to fix that, other than just, hopefully analyzing with him and say, look, probably should have let Tyler Anderson go deeper. We probably should have, and maybe what happened in the rest of the postseason this year, maybe we'll give him a little clue, but even that, it's like, I don't know if you noticed in game 4 of the 3 or 4, one of those of the NLCS, Rob Thompson did exactly the same thing that Roberts did with Tyler Anderson. He pulled Ranger Suarez after 60 something pitches and 5 innings. And it was universally praised of this manager's going for it. He saw an opportunity and he knew we got to get this win, but that's because it worked. What makes managerial decisions look good is when the players perform. And so the decision works out. And so I don't know there's anything that the Dodgers could do. I almost would like to have, obviously Edwin Diaz would be ideal. Bring in Edwin Diaz. I don't know if the Dodgers are going to pay that much for the closer, whatever Diaz is going to get. But having a guy like Kenley who says, okay, you're going to pitch the 9th inning in the regular season, and we may leave you off the postseason roster like we did to Kimbrell. The problem is when we're talking about Kenley specifically, all the sentimental and emotional baggage, like we talked about this year. The reason the Dodgers were able to leave their closer off the postseason roster is because they didn't care about him as a person, and Kenley has that longstanding relationship with the Dodgers, and maybe it will be different since he went away for a year, but it's still, I don't know. I feel like Kenley gets handled with kid gloves a little bit sometimes.
Yeah. And that's another reason that, I don't want feelings, I want facts and I want stats and I want, that stuff to dictate. And occasionally your gut, but Dave Roberts' gut, not always the best gut to use. So stick with the numbers and see what happens. All All right. Well, actually, there was an interesting decision in the last game of the NLCS. We'll get into that because the World Series is set. We got Astros again, third time in the last 4 years, fourth time in the last 6 years. And then we have the Phillies, who hadn't made it since 2010 or 2009, when they lost to the Yankees. They won in 2008. But real quick, reminder to make Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. And thank you for listening to Locked On Dodgers. All right, Jeff. So there's going to be no baseball for the next 4 days because the series both ended early. The Phillies won in 5 and the Astros swept in 4. And I guess real quick before we get into like just the World Series talk and everything else, and the Padres losing and Dodger fans maybe loving it a little too much for my liking and how I handle things, but regardless of that, we'll get into that. But it seemed like Bob Melvin, they had they had their Suarez on the mound, and he's facing Bryce Harper's coming up in the 8th inning in a game that the Padres are leading by 1, runner on first, and Hader warming up, and Hader doesn't get into the game. They leave Suarez in. Bryce Harper ends up hitting a 2-run home run that puts the Phillies ahead in the bottom of the 8th. They end up going on to win, obviously, in the next inning in the 9th. And it was just one of those where interesting decision. Like I said, one of those, if Suarez gets Harper out, then it's a manager sticking with his guy and sticking to a plan, maybe to use Hader only in the 9th. And then when it doesn't work out, it's why wasn't Hader in there against a left-handed guy, especially a guy that's been dominating this entire postseason. So just an interesting, little nugget to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. The main argument in favor of closer by committee or not having a set closer is, and it's an argument I've made many times because I'm a firm believer and fan of the closer by committee and not having set innings, is the 9th inning isn't always the most important inning. And in that game 5 of the NLCS, the 8th inning was clearly the most important inning. You got JT Realmuto, Bryce Harper, and Nick Castellanos coming up with a 1-run lead. That is the ball game right there. And if Suarez gets through that, then you have Hader facing, the 6, 7, 8 hitters or whatever it was that ended up batting. And it's like, why would you want Josh Hader facing the other team's 6, 7, 8 hitters instead of their 3, 4, 5 hitters? It's ridiculous. And I think one of the criticisms of Dave Roberts that was overblown in that last loss to the Padres was people talk about that Roberts went away from the plan and was saving Evan Phillips for the 9th. And that is what Dave Roberts said. But like I said on the episode last week, I really believe what Dave Roberts meant was we were saving Evan Phillips for the next time Soto and Machado came up. And then because Soto and Machado ended up batting 2 innings in a row, they batted in the 6th. And so I think at that point, Dave Roberts thought, okay, we're going Evan Phillips in the 9th inning because that's the next time Soto and Machado will get up. They ended up getting up again in the 7th because the wheels came off. And at that point, maybe Roberts could have adjusted quicker. I don't know. And we talked all about that last week. If you want to go back to, I guess it was last Tuesday's episode that we talked about, I played the devil's advocate on getting Evan Phillips warmed up and then they get out of the inning and you've burned him, all that stuff. Sorry, I hit my mic stand. I get so passionate about these things. But in this case, in this Phillies Padres game, there's no argument there. And the people defending the non-move are saying, well, it's not fair to ask Josh Hader to get 6 outs when he hasn't done that all year. Don't ask him to get 6 out. Ask him to get 3 outs, but ask him to get the important 3 outs. Say, Josh, you're pitching the 8th inning because that's when Bryce freaking Harper is coming up and he's the best hitter in baseball right now. It's not that hard. You have Hader come in, get Realmuto, Harper, and Castellanos, and then have your grandma pitch the 9th inning. Who cares? Because you already used your best reliever to get through the hardest part of the lineup. It's not even hard, but because Josh Hader is the closer. If you ever read the book, The Only Rules That Has to Work by Ben Lindbergh and Sam Miller, the line from that over and over is the closer's the closer because he's the closer. And that's not a way to win baseball games. The way to win baseball games is, Bryce Harper's coming in. Should we use our best pitcher or our second best pitcher? Boss, let's go with the best pitcher. Good idea. You deserve a raise. All right. And maybe Harper homers off Hader too, maybe. But you use your best pitcher to face the best part of the lineup. It's not that hard.
Yeah, and in game 3 where there's not a chance to be eliminated, okay, maybe. But in game 5, when you are literally eliminated if you lose, go with your best. And if you lose with your best, you lose with your best. But at least, you lose with your best. And we've seen it in the past. We all remember Craig Kimbrough standing in the bullpen when Juan Uribe hit his big home run. We all know the Zach Britton with Buck Showalter situation with the Orioles back in the day. And, regardless, in the end, it led to the Padres losing. And, well, I guess we'll talk about real quick before we talk about the actual World Series. Yeah, Jeff, I know you're very much so that you don't care about any team other than the Dodgers unless the Dodgers are playing them. Dodgers weren't playing anyone. Padres lost. Did you get any extra satisfaction out of it, like a lot of people on social media did?
I don't think I did. I was definitely rooting for the Phillies in that series to the extent that I cared. I like Bryce Harper. I've always had a soft spot for Bryce Harper, so I was happy to see him come through. Rhys Hoskins, the bat throwdown he did. When was that? That was in the first series, right? That was I think that was
a lot
in
of times. He had
yeah,
like 3
but
home runs
the
in
big one I think the first homer he hit in the postseason against whoever they played. Who did they play? I don't know. Cardinals. Yeah. That gave me a soft spot for Rhys Hoskins. I don't really care, but no, it didn't really matter to me more because it was the Padres. And I don't know. I feel like that's little brother thinking, I always give Giants fans a hard time because, the Giants could lose 95 games, but as long as the Dodgers don't win the World Series, it's a successful season for Giants fans. And I don't think that we as Dodger fans should be acting like that because we are the big brother, and I care about teams once the Dodgers are out, I don't care really. I watch it because I enjoy baseball. I'm a baseball fan, but I don't even go in knowing who I'm going to root for. I turn on a series, obviously in the Yankees Astros series, I knew who I was rooting against at least, but really I turn on a game and I just see who I find myself rooting for. And so I was happy to see the Phillies win. I was happy to see Bryce Harper get the big hit. But other than that, I didn't care a whole lot.
Yeah, for me, it's always the team. I'm not clowning the team that beat me, regardless of what the situation was, regardless, if the Padres celebrated like they won a World Series and when they beat the Dodgers, that's what they should do. They beat, they won. They can do whatever they want when they win. Now, if they end up, losing in the next round, I'm not going to go back and be like, oh, you guys lost. Come have a seat next to it, that type of stuff. But, teach their own. Everybody's different. We're not telling you how to handle things. We're just talking about our opinions on how to handle things. And
and I do hope Stephen Woods is sad right now. I hope he's sad and having a miserable night, honestly.
Yeah, very possible. All right, so we don't have that much time left, but World Series, it's not really it's a fun matchup if you're a baseball fan, like a big baseball fan. If you're just a casual fan, realistically, you probably don't really care. Similar to last year, the Braves are a little more national name just because the TBS and they were on everybody's TV sets, in the 90s and maybe 80s. I don't know how far back it went, but yeah, Jeff, Phillies Astros I know you'll probably watch when you can. I don't know if you'll set aside time for it, but you got any thoughts or predictions or anything?
The Phillies have kind of outplayed everybody's expectations so far, and the Astros really haven't hit very well in the postseason for the most part. And so I could see the Phillies pulling this off. One thing I do think is I think that it's going to be a very, very lopsided as far as who's being rooted for. I think anybody who's not an actual Astros fan is going to be rooting for the Phillies because the Astros are the most hated team in baseball right now. And, it's for me, the thing that's going to make it hard to watch a lot of the games is I really don't like watching games that take place at Minute Maid Park because I hate that stadium. I think it's a little weird dimensions. Like, I don't know. I don't like stadiums that are made quirky just for the sake of being quirky. At least they got rid of the stupid hill out in center field and replaced it with Torchy's Tacos. Best queso you'll ever find. Check out Torchy's Tacos. Only reason to go to Minute Maid Park is Torchy's Tacos. But that stupid left field wall, and it's like, it doesn't need to be there. I've been there. There's room to have a real size baseball stadium. And so I have a really hard time watching games at make-believe stadiums. And honestly, once it was the Astros and Yankees in the ALCS, we were guaranteed there was going to be some stupid baby stadium in the World Series, and it's the worst one that made it. And so I don't know, between the stadium and I don't like seeing Astros fans happy, I'm going to have a hard time watching the World Series. I'll probably have the games on, but have the volume down.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, the stadium didn't really play a factor actually in any of the game, like a huge factor. There was maybe like one or two home runs that really played, so at least that. But with a team like the Phillies, who have guys, Nick Castellanos hasn't hit well, but he can hit fly balls to left field, and fly balls to left field can become home runs. Reese Hoskins hasn't hit well overall, but when he has hit, it's been for home runs. So another guy. But yeah, I mean, you look at this Astros team, and they're good. Like they're legit, as much as it hurts to like kind of admit, they're legit. You have Verlander and then, Framber and then even Christian Javier. And then they have Luis Garcia and McCullers who, I kind of wanted them to lose just because I wanted McCullers to blow it. But other than that, I mean, Altuve's depends how you feel. Bregman's the most unlikable with Gurriel, like those three. And those are the only three really left from that team hitting wise. So it's not like the Astros, I still don't want them to win, but at the very least, if they win, there's, Jordan Alvarez is cool other than the fact that you think about he could have been a Dodger. Jeremy Pena has been fun to watch and kind of taking over for Correa. Kyle Tucker's boring, but, he was good during the regular season, not so much so far in the postseason. But yeah, I mean, I'm going for the Phillies. I'm rooting for the Phillies, but I don't know how much I'd be watching if I didn't have to for work. I'll say that.
Yeah, and I have to retract something I said. I said I'll watch it, but with the volume down. But then I realized really the only reason to watch the series is Joe Davis. And I actually like Joe Buck more than a lot of people do. But the one thing I really don't like is something I don't like about a lot of announcers. I don't like set home run calls. And I don't like that every World Series highlight you watch from the last 20 years, back at the wall, it is gone. And it's like over and over. It's like, come on. And so Bryce Harper's home run, one of the best things, it was Joe Davis instead of Joe Buck calling it, because Joe Davis doesn't have a set home run call. He reacts with emotion to what's happening in the baseball game, and he's so freaking good. And yeah, I might actually watch the series, but with the screen off and just for the sound, what's that called? Oh, radio. Is there a radio broadcast of the Fox broadcast of the World Series? I might do that. Really, if they could drown out the crowd noise, so I don't have to hear Astros fans being happy ever. Just hear Joe Davis. I think that would be my perfect broadcast of the World Series.
Yeah. One last thing I will say that I do like that both teams are going to go in same amount of rest. All the you're gonna get Nola, you're gonna get Wheeler, you're gonna get Verlander, you're gonna get Framber, and there's gonna be like no excuses. There's gonna be just straight up this team versus this team. Let's see who wins.
Yeah, and same amount of rest and a lot of it. And so it's it's not both teams had one day of rest. It's both teams can start with their ace on whatever day the World Series starts.
Friday.
What is it? Friday?
Friday.
Yeah. And so they can all go with their number one starter. And yeah, it really will be a battle of, okay, who's the better team right now, or who's the hotter team, who deserves to win the World Series. So yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah. All right. That's going to do it for today's episode, unless you have anything else, Jeff.
No, a lot of fun stuff to talk about this offseason. Obviously we wish the Dodgers were still playing, and they're not. We'd have even more fun with these episodes if they were. But the fact is there's plenty to talk about this offseason, and we really like talking about the Dodgers. So I'm looking forward to the offseason with you guys.
Yeah, we're going to be here every weekday morning, as you guys know it. If you need something else to listen to, check out Locked On MLB with Sully. He brings his unique perspective on the game. He's got the #1 daily league-wide podcast. Go check out Locked On MLB on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts, which is also where you can find us if you search for Locked On Dodgers, which is also how you can find us on Twitter and Instagram, Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Vince Samperio. DMs are open on all those accounts for any questions, comments, ideas, thoughts, topics. We're open. We got a long off season. We're going to get into a lot of things, so bring it to us. You can also reach out to us via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us. When you get in your car, if you're at home, tear your smart device, play podcast Locked On Dodgers, and remember, you don't have to agree, you just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.